Hey, Bill, I know this was a tough decision for you. What were the conversations with Steve like this week when you were looking back on the season and the results of, the last 7 years, and what did it ultimately come down to for you?
Yeah, Ben, you're right. It certainly has been a tough day and tough tough bit of a grind lately. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail as to the content of the conversations that Steve and I had over the past few weeks, but we certainly had several of them after returning from the Big East tournament. And I mean, we talked a lot about what the expectations are and where what we need to do to get better and to continue on the right trajectory. And and there were just some areas at the end of the day where I think we felt differently about what was the right way to go on some things. And at some point, I hate to use the old phrase philosophical differences, but at some point, you take a look at where the program currently stands and how we are moving forward together, and sometimes you got to make the hard decision, and that's what we did.
John Fanta.
Bill, thanks for taking some time with us. To your point about just what you see as the Marquette basketball philosophy, what do you think you'd like to see change, evolve in your next step here as you look for a new leader? What exactly are you looking for?
Thanks, John. It's a great question. First of all, I want to say this. Many of the expectations that we put around our program were met by Steve over and over and over again. He recruited incredible young men into our program as I talked to the team today, I mentioned that one of the great things about what I get to do every day is work with young men like them and young women like those on our many of our teams. And Steve relentlessly brought in really good people. He did it the right way. I never went to bed at night worried about what might be going on in our program that shouldn't be going on in our program. It just was a non-factor for us. So in so many of the ways that you want to judge a program, he was truly hitting it out of the park. But at the end of the day, I believe a storied program like this and the support we provide to it, I think competing pretty consistently at the top of the Big East. Certainly, a pretty regular stream of NCAA bids and, the occasional opportunity to run deep in March. I think those are all things that we as a program should aspire to. And as I look forward, I'm going to look for somebody who feels the same way and somebody that we believe can make that happen for us.
Dennis Krause.
Where'd Dennis go?
Let's go, Ben.
My fault. Got me now?
Oh, no, Dennis. Go ahead, Dennis.
Sorry about that. Speaking of the next coach, Bill, does it need to be a proven head coach?
It's funny. I've done now at two different stops. I think I've done, I don't know, it's 10 or 11 coaching searches, and I'm never more than 4 or 5 questions in when that one comes up. And I've always given the same answer, but haven't always lived up to the answer. My first answer is I think I genuinely have a bias for head coaches, but I've also crossed paths during those searches with assistant coaches that seem to have what it takes to make that step. So, again, I will go into this one with a bias of a sitting head coach certainly has a leg up perhaps on somebody who's never been a head coach, but I'm not going to rule anybody out just on that alone. Let's face it, we all had to have that first head job, me included, as an athletic director. Thank goodness, somebody took a chance on me, and Ball State took a chance on me as a first-time athletic director. So Dennis, it's a bit of a long answer, but I think the preference is a proven head coach. I do think a head coach brings to the table. I mean, they hit the ground running, and they know that they've already seen many of the things that they're going to see. So I think the learning curve tends to be shorter. But having said that, I'm never going to just say that's the only route I'll go.
Stephen Watson, go ahead.
Hey, Bill, thanks so much for taking the time.
Absolutely.
I'm curious what you think the ripple effect impact this might have on the program, understanding that NCAA is granting players the ability to transfer without penalty right now? Are you worried about the ripple effect of this decision?
Yeah, if you're specifically asking about the ripple effect to our current student athletes and our incoming class of recruits, the answer is yes, absolutely. It certainly, you just wouldn't have your eyes open if you didn't think this could certainly be a reason for somebody to begin looking around. Let's be honest with each other. A huge piece of any recruiting decision is the head coach. I mean, they just are. And so when the head coach changes, I don't fault our student athletes at all for thinking, is this still the right place? Now, that being said, I think Marquette's a phenomenal place. I think our student athletes are having great experiences here. And we will be very strategic and thoughtful and intentional in terms of trying to keep everybody together. But am I concerned about it? Sure.
Lance Allen, go ahead.
Bill, thanks for the time. As you stated, it's so much more than just one thing, character or players and stuff like that. But this time of the year, people tend to focus on the NCAA tournament, rightfully so. Just 2 appearances in the last 7 years. Is that something that you're looking at and say, okay, Marquette needs to be more consistently in the picture or winning NCAA games?
Yeah, there's no question that's a factor. Now, I would argue had there been a tournament last year, we would have been in 3. But yeah, I mean, we're all playing for championships, or at least I believe Marquette is, and we want to, and we have a great history in the tournament, and getting to the tournament more frequently is an important measurable for us. So it's absolutely a critical metric.
Back to Ben Steele. Go ahead.
When you announced the decision to the players, what was their reaction?
It's always hard. It's one of the worst parts of my job. I think our players, for the most part, were having a terrific experience and have tremendous respect for Steve, to them, Coach Wojo. So yeah, it's really hard. And I'll tell you what's complicated it, is it's so hard now to be the one who actually shares the news with them. And when I was a younger administrator before the kind of the social media explosion, you actually could get to the student athletes first. And now it's virtually impossible because of the number of people who have to be part of the process. So, I'll tell you, but before they walked in, we did it in the locker room, and before they walked in, they already knew. They knew what the meeting was about, and they knew what had happened. So, so they already had kind of understood what was coming. But they are wonderful young men. They feel for Coach Wojo and his family, and they're certainly interested in where we go from here.
Shane Hogan, go ahead.
Hey, Bill, thanks for taking the time. We talked about the next coach and experience, but outside of that, whether it's a previous head coach or an assistant, what are other qualities that you're going to really look at as the incoming head coach to lead this program back to where you want to see it go?
Right. Yeah, no, a great question. And for every search I've ever done, I put together a list of criteria that I feel a new head coach would have to fit. And believe it or not, it's not always the same. I mean, it's close from sport to sport, but there sometimes can be a little bit of a nuance. But it's certainly things like a proven record in academics. This is not an easy place to go to school, and we expect you to get good grades here and be in class and do all those things. And so I want somebody who's as committed to that as we are. Certainly on the opposite, a committed record, or a commitment to avoiding the NCAA situations and NCAA compliance. I'm not real interested in bringing somebody in who's had a lot of issues around that. I think recruiting is the lifeblood of any program. That's an old line, but I believe it to be true. So certainly interested in somebody who's got a proven record as a recruiter. I also, you know, I want to see, and maybe I shouldn't say this because maybe some prospective candidates, it's letting them cheat a little bit if they hear this, but you know, I want to know what kind of identity they expect our team to have on both sides of the ball, and how they go about recruiting to fit the identity. You know, it's not always just about trying to find the 5-star kid. I mean, that certainly is a piece of what we do for sure, but that's not the be all end all. And so, you know, that kind of decision making and that kind of identity creation, you know, what kind of defense am I going to play, and am I going to recruit the kind of kid who can do that? So it's probably 9, 10, 11 things like that we kind of use as a measuring stick.
John Fanta, did you have another one?
I did. Thanks, Scott. Bill, obviously, you know, the Milwaukee area, the Marquette community, the kind of basketball fans you have there. What would your message be to your fan base today?
You know, I guess bittersweet. You know, I mean, it's really hard. I mean, Steve Wojciechowski is a phenomenal guy, and his family, you know, an incredible family, and they bought into Marquette, and they loved being at Marquette, and so, you know, that piece is hard, and you know, in some ways you kind of feel like a member of our Marquette community has gone away, and I hope I'm not the only one that feels that way. You know, Steve did a lot for our community, so you know, that piece is painful and hard for me anyway. But I would also say to the fans that I certainly am excited about beginning the process of seeing who comes in and you know, sits in the chair for our program going forward. And I am really confident that we're going to find somebody who can absolutely hit the bar, as I kind of outlined in a few questions before. So, you know, I would hope at the end of the day, our fan base is pretty excited.
Zoe, go ahead.
Hey, Bill. So I know after like writing that in-depth article on Steve, just talk, you know, he has that great character. So obviously, is that going to be a big part of obviously who you're looking for? And are you considering too, like a little bit of like the diversity aspect for that next head coach as well?
Yeah. So Zoe, let me start with that. Yeah. Diversity is every hire we make, diversity is a critical piece of the equation. So yes, the answer to that is unequivocally yes. You know, as far as character, those are a couple more things that certainly are on the checklist, is the character of the individual. Something else that, you know, you don't necessarily hear a lot of talk outside of our department, but you really want somebody who's going to be a great teammate within our department, a great teammate to other coaches. We all know, particularly in men's basketball, it's the tip of the iceberg. And it's the part of our department that everybody sees and everybody rallies around. And the right head coach, and by the way, Steve was that. The right head coach is always willing to help our other coaches and to help student athletes from other sports, gets on the phone to help recruit soccer players, you know, those sorts of things. So, you know, character and willingness to be a great teammate with the rest of the department are also very important.
Back to Ben Steele.
Yeah, in the release, it mentioned that the costs of the coaching change were going to be paid by the athletic department. It's obviously been a very tough financial year overall for the athletic department. How much does this add to the stress of that? And were there any donors or anything for that coaching change?
Yeah, again, Ben, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but certainly we have worked with our finance folks, and we made this move knowing that it was going to be on intercollegiate athletics to absorb the cost of the transition. And you know, there's a number of different ways that we will attack that moving forward, but it's real, and it's where it's going to come out. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, we had to do what was right for our program. And I feel like once we've reached that decision, then it was, okay, can we afford to do that? And the decision was, yes, we can. And we're going to have to tighten our belts, and we're going to have to raise some more money, and we're going to have to maybe sell some more tickets, but we will get that done.
Steve from the AP, go ahead.
You had just said that Steve was the right coach. What do you think kind of just went wrong that made y'all make this decision? And also just I'm getting here late, but I just want to make sure. But is this something y'all kind of knew you were probably going to have to do after the Big East tournament, or did your mind change at some point the last week regarding his future?
No, I would say it was not automatic that we were going to do it after the Big East tournament. We initially sat down to say, let's see if we can kind of carve out a path forward. And so we spent a couple of weeks working in that direction. And we, as I said earlier, you might not have been on the call yet, but as I said earlier, we reached one of those, forks in the road where we didn't necessarily agree on what some of the right next steps were. And that's when the decision was made that it's probably the right time to go in a new direction.
Nick, go ahead.
Hey, Bill, thanks for taking the time. In terms of that next candidate, do you have a preliminary list right now? Anyone you really have your eye on, or is that something you're going to dig deeper into in the coming weeks?
Well, I have two lists. I certainly have a list, yes, that some of us here in the department have put together. The old line about do ADs have lists? They actually do. So that's not just a throwaway line. You're always, sometimes some people keep it in their head. My memory's not good enough, so I don't keep it in my head. But so yes, there is a list. And now I've discovered with my 300 text messages, there's a whole nother list that a lot of fans are giving me. So there's a whole bunch of new names coming up. But yeah, the bottom line is yes, there is a list.